All right, welcome everybody. Today I have with me
Chaplain Arthur Aguilar
and his lovely bride,
Leanne Aguilar.
Awesome. How many years have you all been married?
Almost 21.
Almost 21 years. That's awesome.
6 months shy.
Yeah, we're halfway there.
That's
Big
awesome.
2-1. Yeah.
So what spiritual concept of being one played out in your marriage?
Spiritual concept of being one. I think the length of our marriage is one thing.
Yeah.
But when I think about becoming one, in our experience, I automatically refer to how young we were when we got married.
Yes, I think we got married so young, and then we left. We left the city we lived in a year later. So we haven't lived, well, we recently did, but for, I don't know, 10 years, 12 years, something like that. We didn't live at home or live in the same town. And so I think that helped us grow together versus relying on them.
Now, how young? How young were you?
I was 19. She was 18. Yeah, and I say that because I think in many people's lives, right? Their parents, their teachers, right? All these people play a formidable role in their development. And for me, Leanne played a formidable role. I mean, and I can't even express how big that role was, because we just come from different backgrounds, but I was young enough to where that really changed who I was.
Yeah.
I mean, there's so much of me I just wouldn't have if I hadn't gotten married to Leanne.
Yeah.
So would you say that your adolescence, being 19, she's being 18, you kind of grew into each other in your adulthood because you have essentially been together all of your adult life? So it's like you kind of let go of the old self and, hello, this is the new me, we're growing together. So you kind of been bonded together because you've experienced all of life together. Is that what you would say?
Yeah. I mean, definitely. And I think not having mom and dad there they couldn't save us, right? When they weren't there, they couldn't save us. You could call and talk all day, but it's like when we had issues, you just had to deal with them. You know, we either had to deal with them together. And so it kind of forced us to lean on each other, even when things were not always perfect. I mean, being as young as we were, things weren't always perfect, but it forced us to deal with it because there wasn't somewhere else to go. You know, you couldn't just go sit on mom's couch for the day and go home and go to sleep. You know, that wasn't an option. We didn't have that choice. And so I think it forced us to sit in those problems and deal with them as they came up versus, you know, going back to mom and dad every time something happened.
So even if you were a daddy's girl, you can say, forget you, I'm going to live with mom for a week till you get your act together.
Yeah.
Okay.
That wasn't an option.
Unfortunately for her.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right. Awesome. How did you know that you were mature enough for marriage? I mean, 18 and 19, you guys are staring down forever at such a young age. Yeah. I mean, you just hit full puberty. Come on. How did you know you were mature enough?
I don't think we knew.
Yeah.
There was not a knowing. I think what we did know was that we felt like God was telling us that this was the person and that it needed to be. And I think we were in the middle. Yes, you said that, full puberty. That's pretty accurate. I think that was just like we knew things we wanted, and therefore marriage was the easiest way to go. I don't think I don't think we were mature at all.
Yeah, when he was asking that question, I was thinking, that's an easy answer. I didn't. Like, I had no idea. It's at least in terms of maturity. I think even to this day, despite my level of immaturity, I am still strongly convicted of God's direction in that.
100%.
I mean, I look back at all of it, and there's no part that I think, oh, that wasn't, that was me, or I was misinterpreting something. Like, I look back and I'm just like, despite my immaturity, it was the right choice.
Yeah, I mean,
That's hard to explain.
I say this with, my dad, like, literally standing at the foot of the aisle said something like, "You don't have to do this. Like, we can leave now. Like, you can just go get in the car and it's fine." And I think it was like, there was a part of me, like, it was very comforting knowing that, because yes, I was not in a place maturity wise to make that decision, but it was also nice knowing that he was okay. Like, if I backed out at 18, he wasn't like holding it against me. But it was, was I mature enough? Absolutely not.
Okay.
Even a year later, were we mature enough to move? Absolutely not.
Because you guys completely left the States from home. You weren't like around the corner.
No.
Well, yeah.
We moved to Oklahoma from Texas. So we were a good 12 hours.
Yeah.
It wasn't a hop and a skip home. You had to plan it out.
And fly, probably, huh?
Yeah, well, if we could have afforded it.
We didn't have that kind of money either.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, we were
we made no money.
And just paying
we
the bills.
Jobs to make the ends meet, and that's pretty much what we did.
Well, as a matter of fact, the way that we earned enough money to go, just to make the trip and to move, was I worked overtime, and they had incentives at the place that I was working. It was a call center, and I would work from sun up to sundown, and that was our goal. That was our intention, was to move. But we moved into my parents' house. That was a story unto itself.
Yeah.
And then and I just worked, and we just saved up
for months.
Yeah. So, but we spent all of our money on the move, and we got there.
So part of that unity is you guys had the same goals in mind, huh?
Oh, yeah.
It wasn't just, and we're going to get into money later on. It wasn't, what are you doing? Well, that's my money. You guys had a unified mission or a purpose.
Oh, yeah.
So what advice would you say to young people nowadays? They're like, well, I'm still young, and what else is out there? I don't feel like I'm ready yet. This is a good guy, but I don't know. I want to do this first. I want to date around first. This is what young people are saying, or even with guys. Oh, she's a good girl. She can cook. But what else is out there? What advice would you give to those people?
I'd say that the statement, grass is greener on the other side, is always true. It looks nice, but the reality is every relationship has its moments where it's shining and pretty and green, and then the next moment it's in the dirt, and it is, because that's reality. Life isn't always shiny and new, and things get hard. In 20 years you cannot expect that, you're never going to be with somebody 20 years and everything be perfect for 20 years.
Yeah.
It's not going to happen.
I like that. We'll put a pin on that one later on. We talk about how you avoid divorce. Yeah. So, what do you think makes a good husband as a man? What do you think a good husband is? Or what do you think a good wife is? Or if you want to reverse it, like in the previous session, well, how would you define a good wife, sir? And how would you define a good husband? So what do you think, what qualities or characteristics, or what do you think people need in order to say, yes, I'm ready for marriage?
I think at its core, you really need a sense of trust, right, in the other person, and in any relationship, in the infancies of that, that takes some development, and it also takes some faith, right? Yeah. But you have to have it. You have to be able to say, I trust you. But then on the other side, you also have to have a level of commitment, right? I trust you, and I'm here. Yeah. Like, I ain't going nowhere. And I think those are two things that I strive to do as a husband, right? Is develop trust, and I make mistakes, and I'd say, man, that hurt, right? That hurt her trust. And I try to recover from that, and because I know that's important for her to be able to trust me. And sometimes whenever I find myself maybe feeling attacked or maybe just bringing stuff up, and then I try to step back and just say, is she asking these things of me or questions of me because I have destroyed some level of trust or some aspect of trust? And so I just try to really do my best, and I don't always do the best, right? But I try to do my best to just turn that around and say, she needs help, right? And she has to be able to trust me to give her that. And maybe if I don't wash the dishes, for too often, too long of a period of time, I know that's simple, but it's also one way that I can just build trust, one little thing that I can do to do that. And I think whenever you first asked that question, my mind automatically went to two things. One, the image I have of being a man, right? And two, the image I have of being a husband. And ironically enough, a big part of that is due to my father, who is my biologically stepfather. But a really large part of that, and she's heard this throughout our marriage and my life, is also trying to do the opposite of what my biological father did.
Okay.
And those are two things that he did horribly. Every action he took in his life with my mother was destruction of trust and no semblance of it.
Yeah.
And two, an absolute roller coaster of commitment, right? Apologize, I'm sorry, I'll do better, I promise, right?
Yeah.
But then no follow-up, right? And so I see him in my mind, right? And I think I got to do the opposite of that.
Okay.
Right. And so in some ways that's how I see my role as being a husband, and I think there's a lot more to that. But
so do you think your stepfather was a better example? Let's start with that.
1,000%.
So do you think your stepfather was a role model type of figure for what actions to take for your wife of, okay, this is, my stepfather's doing this, so I could do that for my wife, or he's buying roses, so I should do that for my wife. Do you think a role model is good for a man, another manly figure, to say this is kind of how I should be?
Yes, he was an example in the most important ways, right? And I love the man to death. And he developed trust by providing. He developed trust by caring for and being there with us and for us, and being there in the most difficult and tragic times. And he was committed, and that was something my family wasn't used to. He was there.
Yeah.
We may get to this later, but in a blended family, there's a lot of tension. There's a lot of conflict, but he wasn't going anywhere.
Awesome.
And although I questioned that just as a stepchild early on, I look back and I know that was never a question. Now, was he the most ranked person? No, I don't know where I got that from. But yeah, he was definitely not the type to necessarily bring home flowers. Like, I remember several instances where he kind of like awkwardly brought an anniversary card because he had forgotten. And, they would never go on dates. I don't know how much money they had to do so.
I don't know, it's funny, then they go on dates now. Like,
it is.
It's very awkward.
I love it. I love it.
Funny.
He's doing so much better now. But yeah,
awesome.
He wasn't the most romantic then.
Okay. And Miss Leanne, what would you say, what would make a good woman a good wife?
I guess my first thought is, you have to make sure as a wife your husband is only second to God in your life. As much as I love my children, they don't stay with me forever. And there's seasons to that. When you have an infant at home, they always come first because they can't do anything for themselves. But as they age and we change seasons, I think that's important, that you are putting them first. And just all the things you do, I think a lot of it is dependent on your situation. Staying home, a big part of it for me is I take care of the home front. That is my job. That is what I do. That makes me a good wife. When he comes home, it's not stressful. It's not argumentative. It's not, you need to come home and do X, Y, and Z for me. We have definite roles and responsibilities in our home, but I try to do as much of that, even those things, as I can. On the other hand, I think that does depend on your situation. If you're working, that changes a little bit. And when I've worked, that has changed off and on. But I still think there's a big part of just encouragement and, pulling each other towards that more godly, spiritual side of things. Because if your spouse isn't, nobody else will.
I like that. Let's elaborate on this. You said your husband is only second to God, so God first, then your husband, and then your children. What would you say to those people who say, I put my kids first, I ain't no man coming above my children? What would you say to those people who think this way?
I would say our job as parents is to teach them to be adults. I can't teach them to be adults when I never treat them like an adult. And so there's some level of responsibility in my children. Like I said, if you have a 6-month-old, obviously that's not the same as my 12-year-old. My 12-year-old daughter can take responsibilities because she's 12, and she needs to know what it means to, when she eventually gets married, what that's going to look like. She needs to see it. If she doesn't see it from me, she's not going to see it yes, I think she has good role models. She has my mom, and she has my sister. She has other women, her grandma. But, this at home is where she sees it the most. And so I think she needs to see that. And I think Matthew needs to see what you do. I think he needs to see what I do. He needs to see the sharing of responsibility, because in life, realistically, your spouse is supposed to be that partner in that. And you can't teach that if you're not giving them some responsibilities, if you're not handing some of that over to them and being a good example in that. And if you're always putting them first, there's an entitlement that comes from that.
Some would even say enabling them to stay at home. Why would I want to leave?
Yes, that's
so you're saying that you teach them to grow and go. Go ahead, sir.
Well, I was going to say, I like the word she used, a partner, right? I think in a healthy relationship, we had a similar conversation actually with Isabella the other night. Just along these lines, she was asking some questions. But as in a true partnership, you don't have to, quote unquote, put the kids ahead of me, because our focus right now is the kids, right? Is to help them grow. And I hope that at some level I've given you these signs, right, to know that you don't have to fight me to put them first, right? Because you trust me to care for them, right? And because that's what we're doing, right? We're a partnership in that, in this stage of our life. And so instead of it being a battle for who's first, who's not, right? We're doing it together. And
definitely. And I think, and this sounds like a silly thing, and it doesn't always apply, but I do think that it's been, in some ways, when you talk about the kids, it's like a lot of women struggle to allow the husband to do things, right? But it has been really good for the kids to us being able to, sometimes I'm just I'm staying home, this is where I want to be, but I want y'all to go do something. So they'll go do something fun, and it's they enjoy that, and it's good for all three of them, and it's good for me, because I am with them all the time, and I love being with them. But there is those lines, but I also think that goes back to that partnership and the kids seeing that, right? Those roles and responsibilities, and that they're not hard and they're not fast. They don't have to be any one thing, where you can adjust based on what everybody needs at the moment. It's good for everybody then. It's good for dad, it's good for them, it's good for me, and it's not me putting myself over everybody else, or me, or you know what I mean? There's not this level of, if I'm taking care of my needs, your needs aren't met. It's a level of, we can all take care of each other's needs based on what we need in the moments. And I think that takes time and practice.
You heard that right. We get kicked out of the house every now and then. No,
and we love that.
Yeah, we do. We enjoy giving her her space, and we love, as she said, it's good for us, the three of us, because it is. And we've talked about that, right? When you are in the roles we're in, the way we've decided now at this stage of our life to live, right, with me working full-time, you not.
Yeah.
There's a natural imbalance there of my time with the kids.
Yeah.
And so that I genuinely appreciate her for saying, you should go take the kids, because I want to spend time with her.
Yeah.
And she wants to spend time with me. So it's good to hear her say, it's okay for you to go spend time with the kids, because I want that too.
Because I was going to hint to that, because very often some people grow up, they never saw their father until it was dinner time. He showered, he ate, he went to sleep, and by the time they got up to go to school, he was gone to work again. He was always at work, and so they've had very little time with their father except the one day off a week. And so it's good that you had that bonding time where you can pour into them, give them some examples and everything as well. All right. You mentioned earlier how you create a peaceful home environment. When he comes home, how do you do that? Would you like to give some details? Because some people, you said you give them some time to unwind and decompress, because there are some marriages, they come in and here's your honey-do list, bam, get to it. So, would you like to elaborate on that?
I think most of the time, I mean, I really try to, obviously, since we live so far away, he spends 45 minutes in the car, so he doesn't necessarily need a whole lot of time, but if he does, some days are more than others, I would say. And if he needs that, he knows, and I know, like if he goes straight in and goes to the bedroom, that's just what needs to happen, and that's okay. And I try not to take it personally. Sometimes that's easier said than done, because if I've had a bad day too, sometimes that's easier said than done. But we try to communicate about when he's coming home, so that I'm not sitting here waiting for him at 5 and he doesn't show up till 7. It's not a big deal. It's just a matter of like planning, right? Like, so sometimes it's just that thing, right? Hey, let me know when you're headed home so I can start dinner. Or if he's got to stay late, sometimes just saying, like, and sometimes I have to say, hey, I know you've been tied up at work and I know you've been really busy and haven't gotten stuff done. Why don't you just stay an hour later and finish up? Because you come home and you're stressed and it's not helpful to us. So sometimes I think just giving that permission to not be home is, big for us, because he wants to be there, but sometimes him realizing that it's not killing us if he's home an hour later, and that gets him through everything. Plus I would just say, like, since I stay home, so for me it's important that the house is clean. The dishes are, I try not to let it pile up and be a huge mess when he comes home, for him to help clean up then. I try to mostly keep meals done, grocery shopping done. Those things do not always happen. But I try, that's the goal. I try, the kids are happy and we're not throwing, there's not a huge mess when he comes home. Some days are better than others. Right. I will admit to that. But that is, in general, because it's what I want. I want us to be able to sit down in the evening, play a game, watch TV, go for a walk, and you can't do those things if you feel like there's a list of things that still have to be done.
So you mentioned how he sometimes he just needs to go to the room. So would you say that detoxing to not bring stress from work into the home life, would you say that that's important?
Yeah, absolutely. And she's seen it. She knows it, right? Behind closed doors. There are times when the brokenness has broken me. And it can be hard. And so she does a really good job of just checking in on me. Because there have been those moments where I come in and it's a very quick glance and hello, and I just go in the room and I finally feel like I can, and things happen. Like I break down and I pray, and then she comes in and she checks in, right? And I needed that. So I like the word you use, detox, right? And sometimes that includes her coming in. Sometimes it doesn't, but I think just her attentiveness to that is really big. That's
a very good kudos to you, ma'am. So very often, and I saw this online, and you got to listen to what young people are saying. Mm-hmm. So what you're saying is your woman's intuition is to say what is going through his mind. What does he have to do? Okay, he's got a lot of stress at work, so let him know in advance, hey, I'm not mad at you if you stay late to finish it. Mm-hmm. So you're using your woman's intuition for good, not just what is he doing? Let me look through his phone and what is he talking to? You're using your woman's intuition to see what is his workload like. Would you like to expand on that? Because that's a good point of reference for young people.
I think, it goes back to that trust situation. I don't have that let me go through his phone moment, really, because we have, I don't know what the word is. We do a lot of things that just eliminate the need for it. Mm-hmm. Okay, like our phone passwords are the same password. But it just is. Like, so if it is what it is, and knowing the nature of his work, I'm not snooping through his stuff because he talks to people about things that are important and private, and I'm not trying to be in everybody's business. Mm-hmm. On the other hand, he's not hiding it. There's no barrier to me being there. Mm-hmm. Does that make sense? So I don't feel the need. It's because he's not trying to hide it from me. I therefore do not feel threatened by it. Mm-hmm. Having worked in a profession where privacy is important, I don't feel a lot of threat behind it, but I also see the need for not having like a barrier in our home. Right. In something that is so personal, and it can be such a personal thing. Mm-hmm. Also, I think there is just, using that intuition, but that is because it doesn't have to mean that they're stepping out or something bad is happening. Mm-hmm. And even if he was going out and hanging out with his friends, again, he does that sometimes, and that's okay with me, because the reality is we all need those outlets. And as much as I am his outlet, I think majority of the time I know that he needs other relationships and other connections, that I'm not always going to be that. Mm-hmm. And so allowing, when we allow each other to have it, it doesn't feel so threatening. Mm-hmm. Because if I hold on too tight, that doesn't help the situation. Okay. And vice versa. If he's holding on to me that tight, it doesn't help our situation. Whereas if we're allowing for that give and take, I think that there's a lot, you just feel less threatened by it. Mm-hmm. And then in those cases, you can say, look, I've seen so here's another thing we have in place. Like, I see his calendar. I know all the things he's doing. Mm-hmm. They don't apply to me, but when I open our calendar, I can see what things are mine and what things are his. And they're, so when his week is filled to capacity and Friday rolls around and I know he's wanting to stay later and he calls to check in, it's like, it's okay if you stay late, like, because I see what you've been doing. Like, it's Friday night, we can stay up late, it's okay. Like, it's not a big deal if you're not home at 5. Mm-hmm. And I think allowing for that and just putting things in place to where you don't have to constantly nitpick at everything, it makes it easier, because I'm not having to say, well, what did you do today? Look at what I did. Because we can see that.
Keeping score.
Yeah, there isn't that, because we can see it. It is what it is. Mm-hmm. Not to say that those keeping score things don't come up. Sometimes they do, but it's not in the same capacity, and usually easily dealt with, because that's usually not what we were talking about anyway. Mm-hmm. Even though sometimes it gets brought up like that's what we were saying, usually that's not what we were saying.
Yeah. Generally what we're saying is, we're tired, right?
We're cranky.
I'm cranky. Like, I need some space. I need some time. Yeah. I need you sometimes, right? There's so many other things that we're saying besides, I did more than you, you did less than me, kind of,
Yeah, and sometimes it comes out in that way because you're cranky and tired, but not always what it means.
Yeah.
Awesome. What is the key to keeping it together in today's culture?
The key.
You've mentioned a lot of things already.
I think then I'll just go with the first thing that comes to my mind. And I think perhaps the word culture is what brings it up in my mind, and that is just how many other influences there are in the outside world, and so much of it can just creep in and just muddle your what should be peaceful waters, right, in your home. I mean, if nothing else, your home should be a place of peace, of comfort, of rest, and I mean that as a military member, right? Meaning our home is all over the place, but this place with our family, our home should be a place of peace and rest. And so I might say that the key to that is having appropriate and necessary boundaries with a variety of things, right? The things we watch, the things we listen to, the things we do, right? What we're occupying our time with, the hobbies, and how we're spending that, because the little things that disrupt peace can creep in very subtle ways.
I like that. Ma'am, would you like to add to that? Keeping it together, keys to keeping it together in today's culture?
I might also say, as much as we want to lean on our families, and we should lean on them, I also think it's important, it's a very cultural thing to, well, I can just run to my parents, or I can call and complain to my parents, but it causes a lot of conflict. If that's what's happening, because not only are you in conflict, but now mom and dad are mad at them, or and it gets very convoluted. And I think for family's sake, and for the sake of like just home life being peaceful, it's like that importance of not participating in family drama. Staying out of the other family's drama too, because it's easy to get sucked into, and then it is very, you can't keep it together if you're in all the other your family's drama, or your best friend's drama, anybody else's drama. It's better if you just keep yourself out. Mind
your own business, huh?
Yes.
Because very often a lot of people take other friends' drama or what they saw on Facebook, and they bring in that same drama into their own relationships. Like, well, why are you mad at me because of what somebody else did?
Right.
I like how you said not relying on your family so much, because very often, especially daddy's girls, Daddy, guess what he did this time? And Daddy, he did. Instead of talking to their husbands, they're calling on their fathers. Their earthly fathers, instead of talking to their husbands, it's kind of get him, Dad. What would you say to these kind of women who would tattles over, even men who would call Mama, she don't know how to cook?
Yeah.
It's a one-sided argument at that point, because then they're going to take your side. But not every time. It's not always their fault. It's not completely their fault. That's what I meant. It's not. Right. It's always a 50-50 situation.
In any given conflict,
everybody
had a part, right? But your family's not going to see it that way.
No.
Right. Your family,
which is why you go to them.
Yes. Right. Your family is going to say it's their fault. Right. It's your partner's fault. Yes. You should kick them out, or you should. Right. But. I think maybe one thing that I would say to male or female who find themselves in that one, what a blessing to have a parent that you trust and that you love, and you can talk to about that. But now you have a partner that you should develop that same level of trust and confidence in. And that takes work. And part of that work is I'm going to work through this with you, right? Yeah. Not going to work through it with Mom, not going to work through it with Dad. I'm going to work through it with you, so that I can develop that.
I like that. Okay. What actions do you take to make your spouse happy? Or in other words, to know that they're satisfied with you and they made the right choice. There's no regrets. What actions do you take to keep your spouse happy?
One thing that I do to make her happy is make her birthday special. I know that's like a once-a-year thing. There's so many other things, but whenever I first read this question, I thought, I just like making that day special for you. If you didn't know, her birthday's on Christmas Day. And so for the majority of our life, well, no longer, actually, we've been married longer now,
Yeah.
but for a big part of our life, right, that naturally so there's focus on many other things, right, and so I just always made it a point to make that day very special for her, and I think in my maturity, as I've gotten older, as I've grown, I've realized that day should extend, right? And so that is, I want to make you feel special, right?
Mm-hmm.
And I want you to know that I love you and like you are valuable to me.
Yeah, you do.
Oh, thank you. All right, ma'am.
I mean, I guess you do a lot of things, but I like to cook, so I like to cook whatever his favorite is. I don't want to cook. I don't want to cook what my kids' favorite is. Their favorite is chicken nuggets. That's all I want to do. But I want to cook their favorite meal. We do things that the other person likes.
Mm-hmm.
That's another thing you did. He reads books I like so that he can talk to me about them.
All the Harry Potter.
All the Harry Potter books.
So you takes an interest in her likes.
Yes.
Okay.
We go hiking, and it's hard. I think now it's harder because like I say that was a your thing, and it was a your thing.
Mm-hmm.
Now it's kind of an our thing. Yeah. Because you learn to appreciate them and join in those activities and have fun doing them.
I created our two little disciples on that.
You did.
Now you got to come along.
True, that did happen. I don't know.
Yeah.
We do the birthday things. I make all their cakes. He gets to pick his birthday meal every year, and I will make anything he wants. So he picks like ridiculous things, and cakes and meals.
Mm-hmm.
I do whatever he asks for his birthday meal, and so it's like a big thing.
Yeah.
You just do simple. It's a simple thing. Well, he doesn't like birthday parties.
Yeah.
Okay.
And so, like, when we lived with his family were always upset because he wouldn't have a birthday party. But that was because what he wanted was we would do these things at home, or make a big elaborate meal, for us to all try.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. She's made some amazing things, by the way, like prime ribs, like seafood stuffed steak, a whole batch of tamales. Oh my goodness! Like, yeah, so many things.
Try some things.
She's good.
Awesome. You kind of alluded to this when we talked about culture today. Number 7, what do you think couples should stay away from to make their marriage happier? Is it social media? Is it single friends?
Stay away from.
If you want to pass that one, we can.
Well, I'm really. There's so many things that come to my mind, but then if I think about it too much, I don't want to necessarily draw like a hard line, like this is something that you have to stay away from, right, in order for your marriage to be healthy. But I think there's a lot of things that you do have to be careful with. I think the same things that we see in Scripture, right? Just sinfulness as a whole. The word pornography, right, coming from the original language, right, porneia, and meaning so many sexual things in the ancient world. Mm-hmm. And I think we narrow that down now to, in our world, to like a picture, right, mm-hmm. or a video. But really, if you think about it in its essence, it spans much broader. And so I think maybe that's something that you should caution, and that you should be protective of. I know we just live in a world where you're going to walk into the mall or walk, into a store, and there's going to be those things. So that's why I say I struggle to like just draw a straight hard line there. But you're going to see Victoria's Secret, models. I mean, just go to the beach and you're going to be seeing things. So I think it's more of just as we've gotten older, as made some mistakes, and as we've overcome some of those things, you realize that it's about appreciating God's creation for its true sanctity and treating it as such.
Okay.
Right.
Ma'am, anything you recommend couples stay away from for a happier marriage?
I mean, I don't know that it's... I think the thing that jumps the most to me is like the quality time. Mm-hmm. As a married couple, like quality time with, like for me to have spending a ton of quality time with another man is because quality time is what creates relationship, what creates intimacy. And obviously, when you're married, you want that intimate relationship to be with your spouse. And so, like, not to say you don't spend time with other people, but there should be like limits to those things. Whether it be social media, whether it be chatting, calling, texting, all those things, there should be limitations to them. Not that you can't do it at all, but limiting it to so that you're not creating these false, because then that grass is greener on the other side starts appearing, right? Because it's easy with this person I'm only seeing on the side for a few hours a week, mm-hmm. when it's hard when I'm here, mm-hmm. 18 hours a day. Mm-hmm. And so then it creates this unequal expectation that I think a lot of times leads us into areas we just didn't want to go, mm-hmm. And wouldn't have intended to go mm-hmm. at some point. Right. But it ended up there because it looks pretty and new, and it is, but it doesn't last because relationships are hard. Mm-hmm. And so I would say staying away from those boundaries, making those clearer makes it easier.
Mm-hmm. Okay. Mm-hmm. Yeah. What do you recommend couples do more often together to make their marriage happier? Mm-hmm. What works and you're like, yeah, this is a good thing. Let's do this again. Mm-hmm.
I have found the most fruitful thing in our relationship is talking about God.
Yeah.
I mean, and talking about our relationship with God, that's often in the form of just studying, right? Sometimes it's in the form of prayer, but it is the most precious aspect of my life and the most vulnerable aspect of my life, because I trust that God will protect me. But at the same time, it's not necessarily... Some of those conversations I feel most appropriate having with her, right? Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. And I think just having those conversations, we love traveling, road trips, been our entire 20-year marriage, right?
Yeah.
And so we have a lot of conversations just about God, and then the branches that come off of that. Yeah. And I think if people did that more, they could really, coming back to that original question, they could really start to become one just by having those conversations and understanding perspectives and paradigms and the way each other looks at things.
Yeah.
Those common interests, okay?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
What do you recommend couples do more often together?
I mean, I think kind of building off that spending time together, driving in a car, sitting on the beach, having dinner, all those things. I think that time together, ends up being the most important thing, because if you're spending more time with other people than each other, it gets hard to want to spend, then you'd rather be somewhere else than at home. Mm-hmm. And I think if you're wanting to be happy at home,
okay.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Now, number 9, what do you think a single person should look for in a spouse? You mentioned earlier when you talked about husbands being a good husband's wife, being a good wife, you mentioned developing trust, and you talked about having your husband over you. You guys mentioned a lot about character. And today's young people say, oh, he's got to make 6 figures. He's got to make $200,000. So they're looking at money and not character. What do you think a young single person should look for in a spouse?
I think you need to marry your best friend. It doesn't matter how much money they make. I mean, obviously, we didn't make no money when we got married. I don't know. Like, honestly, that has been, and all the people I know, you marry your best friend, that it's easier. Because, you get mad at your best friend, but you figure it out because that's why they're your best friend.
They know you.
Yeah. They know you and you know them, and there's that intimacy that's created in that relationship. And then I think the other stuff follows. I mean, obviously, you hope your best friend believes in God and that y'all are both striving towards that. And as long as you are, I think that those things, all the other stuff, the money stuff, I mean, God has been incredibly, He has blessed us beyond measure. I wouldn't say we've always had a ton of money, but we've always had enough money. It's not always been a lot, but it's always been more than enough to get us through. So.
Yeah, and I think you mentioned somebody that believes in God. I think especially important for anybody that's going to be in a committed long-term relationship, it's important that those values align. I mean, I can only imagine. We haven't had that challenge, right, in our life. But I can only imagine what a great obstacle that would be if your value systems do not align. So I think, speaking of character, right, that what do they value? What's important to them? And maybe this is kind of more the dad in me, right? I tried to think, what would I say to my daughter or my son? And I'm thinking along the lines of, I think it's important that you marry somebody that's hardworking too. Laziness, folly, disaster, Proverbs, right?
Yep.
And so I think this is important that, right, if you take traditional roles, you might not think, right, that a woman necessarily has to have a career, right, if you're trying to think along those lines. But that doesn't mean that she doesn't have to have a strong work ethic, right? And that's important because life takes work, and you want to be joined with somebody who's willing to put in that effort with you. And we've gone back and forth, right? You've worked more hours than I have at times, between the academics and career, right? And so that changes, but at all times we're both just willing to put in the effort, willing to put in the work, and I think that's really important. Somebody's work ethic.
And man, what do you think a single person should look for in a spouse?
I think those are all the.
Okay. You talked about strong work ethic, and it's not that she has to have a career, but strong work ethic even at the home. A lot of young people are asking nowadays because they say they want a man that's 6 feet tall, he's got to have a 6-pack of abs, and he's got to make $100,000, 6 figures. And guys are saying, young people, well, I have all that. What do you bring to the table? And young women say, well, I am the table, meaning they have nothing else to offer. What would you say to young women about their contributions that a woman needs to bring to a marriage?
I think you need to value yourself enough to care what you're putting into it.
They're like, I'm me, I'm pretty.
Well,
I got hair, I got nails.
It doesn't last forever. Sorry. Being pretty isn't a forever thing. I mean...
I find you pretty.
Well, I know you do. Thank you. I just mean, I think when you're 80 years old, it's not going to still be there. And to be honest, I mean, in some ways, it's a very shallow thing. I want my daughter to want to be all the things. Right now she has like 4 career paths, and I want her to do them all. I mean, I know she can't, but I want her to want to do them all, because I think it's important for her to want to be an astronaut and want to, we went to the Navy Museum and she watched a lady talking about the International Space Station, and she came home and she's like, I just want to be like her. And it's like, I want her to be like her. I don't know that she'll be an astronaut, but I want her to want to be, because it's a big dream, and I want her to want to be able to do that. And when she goes into a marriage, those big dreams will be important for her. It'll be important for her to be able to teach her own kids to have big dreams and to want big things. But if you only ever want the shallow, I want to be pretty forever, well, I mean, you'll spend all of your time and money trying to be pretty, and you'll never achieve anything.
Because young women are saying, I want to be a lady of leisure. If you want me, you have to hire a maid if you want the house clean. You have to hire a cook if you want your meals. I'm a lady of leisure.
You're also a lady who's bored. I mean, so many young women tell me that. Well, I'm bored at home. Well, I'm sorry. You shouldn't be bored. If you really wanted something to do, you would find something.
Well, and I think that the thing that you said about valuing yourself, if you really do, you have a true estimation of what God has created. Right? I mean, He created you. He created me, and whichever side you're looking at, there's all sorts of cultural boundaries and boxes that you can put a partner in, female or male. And I want my daughter to not be bound by that box, and to be able to see what God has put in her and that she has to offer in more ways than what that box can say. But I also want my son to, right? I don't want him to only value himself for his job and for the quote unquote amount of money he brings into the house, because what happens if you get into a car accident and you're crippled and now you're on disability and you're a man? Well, what God still created you. Your value is greater than just that alone. And so I think the way you said that is really important, because there's so much more, right? A father should be so much more than just the paycheck he brings home, right? And a mother should be so much more than just the beautiful picture that she has.
And when's my next meal? Where's my chicken nuggets?
Exactly.
For real.
Where's my Capri Sun? Awesome. With divorce being at an all-time high and marital rates slowing, how do you avoid divorce? Some people, the smallest little argument turns into, I want a divorce, or I'm going back to my parents' house. How do you avoid that?
I think we just took it off the table for the most part.
We called it the D word whenever we first got married. Like the other expletives, right? The F word, the S word, and we called it the D word. And it just wasn't on the table. And it here's the interesting thing, and I came across one of our letters during some more tumultuous times the other day, and I was reading it, and without saying the D word, we were struggling to the extent where we were kind of just kind of talking around that, right? And so I think every relationship, right, broaches those waters, if you will, to some level or to some extent. Anything worth having is going to be hard. And at some point, if you train for a marathon, at some point, you broach those waters of, can I keep on doing this? Do I have enough in the tank? Is this all I got? And that happens. But I know, and I think that's where my faith really kicks in. I know that if I do it by what I have left in the tank, it's not enough. But I know that God can strengthen me and allows me to do more.
Okay.
Yeah.
helps me to overcome.
So when those thoughts come of you reining men, or do you pray, God, get your daughter, Lord. Get on my nerves, Lord. Your son get on my nerves, Lord. Okay. Anything you would like to add, ma'am?
No, I think that's pretty accurate. I mean, I think he gives you what you need, and sometimes, I think in some ways it was, I've told you that before, it was pure stubbornness on my part. As I was not going to prove everybody who said we were going to get divorced right. and I think that in some ways there was points where that was 100% true.
Yeah.
Like, the only reason I stayed was because it would just make them right, and that infuriated me. As bad as that is, that was exactly what went through my head to begin with, and then you work through it, right? You start to work through it, and God starts to give you the answers and the pieces and the things that have to happen for that to stop being your only outlet.
Yeah.
For that to be the only way, because there are other ways, but culturally, that's the way. That fixes it. I mean, and I guess it does in a sense. But for us, it would have fixed it. But then we would have still had all these other broken pieces. At least doing it the way we've done it, not sticking it out and going through the fire, so to speak, you come out the other side, and you got the glue in all the cracks, but it's holding, and it's there, and it's together, and here you are 20 years later, and it's like, I look back and I go, yeah, it sucked. It was horrible at times. But here we are, and it's like, you make it through, and yeah, there's other hard times, there's been other things, but it's like, but you add more glue to the cracks and we're good. Like, you stay solid because God is that glue. God is those things holding all the broken pieces together. And you're going to have them anyway. One way they're just shattered around you, and one way they're stuck together, and you're making it work, and you get through life, and life becomes this beautiful picture versus, that series of broken things that just never gets fixed,
So would you say you're stronger because of all the cracks, the things that you've gone through, the struggles, those testimonies, if you will, and it made your bond stronger?
Definitely after the fact, in the moments, that's what makes it hard, is because that person that's supposed to be there, you don't really feel like they're there anymore. But once you work through those things, I do think, I'd say that it ultimately does make you stronger, but it takes time and effort, and every day waking up saying, I'm gonna forgive them, and I don't feel like it, but we're gonna do that today. And every day you wake up, and every day gets a little bit easier, but you literally go for periods of time just saying, I'm forgiving them. God says we're forgiving them, and that is what we are doing. And so you pray, God, help me forgive them today. Today was a good day. Maybe tomorrow's not such a good day, but eventually it doesn't have to be that way. It just takes time, though. You have to be willing to do the work.
Yeah, and I think the other thing that letter reminded me of is that even in those difficult times, you can't stop communicating. Yeah. Like, you've got to find other ways, right? If talking verbally isn't working, you've got to find another way, and you got to be able to work through that and open your heart, as painful as it is. And that's what those letters really represent, right? Sometimes it's just the text message, right? Sometimes it's a letter, sometimes it's a card, sometimes it's just something different than what you've been running, the brick wall you've been running into, because you got to maintain that communication and connect, even whenever the connection is painful.
Okay. Yeah. This is awesome. How did you agree on raising children?
Should I share our first argument?
Sure.
Our very first argument, we were 19 and 18 years old. Yeah, we were 19 and 18 years old. I don't even know how long we've been married. Maybe like a month,
probably,
if that. We're in this tiny apartment that I had moved into because whenever I asked her dad for her hand in marriage, he said, yes, but you got to move out, like, of your parents' house if you're even considering asking her. So I was like, that's fair. I'm about to turn 18, and so I'm going to move out, right? And so I did, and so we were in this tiny apartment, all that I could afford. And we get into this argument, and it was very serious, Will. It was a very serious argument. it was about whether or not our children were going to hand wash dishes or use the dishwasher.
No, and but what it was really about was, were we going to have a dishwasher?
Yes,
because the kids should wash the dishes by hand and not have a dishwasher. And I was like,
and you know, me never having had a dishwasher, I was like, they've got to learn, you know, hard work, and they have to know that you can't really. And I had all my reasons to stand on this mountain and die, and Leanne, we always laugh about it because we were going at it so hard. At one point, she's like, "Forget it," and she walks into the other room. Tiny apartment, there's literally 2 rooms, right? She goes into the other room and these paper thin walls, and she lays on the bed with her feet
on the wall,
towards the wall, and she just screams and goes, ah, and she like starts hitting her feet on the wall.
I'm sure our neighbors loved us.
Yes, we were just both throwing a funny, hilarious fit.
Well, that's what happens when you're 18 and 19 years old and you get married.
Newlyweds.
Yes.
Coming together.
And I think it's so funny. We always think about that whenever we think
do.
about having kids, because that was so early on.
We literally did not have kids for like 10 years.
Yes.
After that. I mean, that wasn't why we didn't have kids, but...
Yeah. The plan was to have them after 5 years. God's plan was to wait later because we were diagnosed as infertile. We wouldn't have kids once we had started trying. And so we had kind of conceded conceded to the idea that it wouldn't happen, and then that's whenever we had 2. And so I think, how do you decide to have kids? I think we had already... we were on the same page.
Yeah. How you raise them.
How you raise them. Yeah, we were on the same page about having them, and then in many ways we've been on the same page about how we raise them. But I think that's because it's just a continual conversation.
I mean, yes, like literally every time they grow so fast, and so it's like you're more or less running behind them, trying to figure out how to make them like not be terrible human beings. Like, I mean, I don't think they're inherently bad, but there's like a part where it's just like they're doing something, you're like, how do I make them stop doing that? Yeah. And you're trying, and you're like, this is what we decided on, and it is not working.
Well, and I use that story because when you talk about raising children, if you have this staunch idea, this is how we're going to do it. Like they're going to learn how to wash dishes by hand. They're going to, what a silly argument. But at the same time, when you think about that, if you stand that way about how you're going to raise your children, then you're going to constantly be in conflict. So it's just always been a ongoing conversation. Yeah. And if there's only one thing that we've been staunch, and we're on the same page with this. No matter what, the primary focus is that we raise children to know God and to have every opportunity to have a relationship with Him. Yeah. And that's it. That's the premise. That's the bottom line of what our hope is for them. Our prayer is for them, and everything else has to fit into that.
Mm-hmm. Okay. Yeah. So knowing God, all right. Mm-hmm. So thinking about your first argument, and now this has been almost 20 years later. Mm-hmm. Praise the Lord. How do you choose what's important enough to argue about and what's not so important to argue about?
I wouldn't say we argue that much anymore. Usually when we are arguing, I wouldn't say we choose what to argue about. I would say we tend to argue, like, when we both get tired and cranky, we tend to argue a lot more. Normally, I wouldn't say we argue. I mean, we try to discuss things when we're not in the heat of a moment, because that is not a productive time to have a conversation. But, I mean, everybody has their moments. Like, arguments are normal, but...
Because many guys, we say, I'm going to do this so that it would prevent an argument. Keep her happy. Don't do this, it's going to prevent an argument. But if it's something that comes up that you need to discuss, how do you choose, this is worth talking about, dishwasher or hand washing, maybe that's not so important to argue about or to get so heated over. Agree to disagree.
Yeah.
Do you? Maybe I'll come back to that one, but I'll ask you this one, number 18. How, and you stop me anytime.
Sure.
How do you compromise when you have differences without feeling like you've lost? And this kind of goes back to that keep and score thing. But they won this time and they won now. Oh, darn it, it's one-sided marriage. I never get my way. So how do you compromise on differences without feeling like you've lost?
Yeah, and I think that really connects to that previous question in the sense that I really don't want you to have to choose what you're going to, because when he uses the word argue, like I think I don't want you to have to choose not to tell me something that's bugging you or something that is important to you, right? Like I think an argument is real. I go back to the way you described it. It's more contextual, environmental than it is on the point, on the subject, right? Because the subject, if you find important, I want you to be able to talk to me about it, right? And if necessary, if I disagree with you, then I want you to be able to discuss it, right? But then to kind of come back to that second answer, so you just gotta say it, right? I mean, you gotta say it, and it could be the little things, but if if the little things are bugging you, I don't want you to not say it just because you think I'm gonna flip out about it. I want you to be able to bring it to me. So I don't know that I necessarily choose what not to say and what to say. Sometimes I might choose not to say something because I'm not sure I'm in the right frame of mind to have this conversation. Like maybe I'm just a little stressed, or maybe she's a little stressed, and this just isn't the right time. This isn't like a behavioral pattern. It's just
discretion.
Yeah.
I mean, I do think looking at this at the moment matters. You can't be mad and then bring up 30 things. Which, okay, I do that. So I have been in a bad habit. I don't do it so much now, but I used to do it really bad. Yeah. And this was a conversation we had, was I would be in a bad mood, I'd be mad about X, and then I would bring up 10 other things I was also mad about. Well, you can't have a productive conversation when you're mad about 30 things. It just doesn't happen. Because you can't solve all the problems at one time. So I think your frame of mind matters. And the situation, I think a lot of time we have our best conversations when we're driving, whether it be just driving. Sometimes we just drive. We just go and we just drive to where we drive and we go home. There's no destination in mind. And we have our best conversation. Those are those moments where, because we're low key, we're chill. Everything is just like, hey, I want to talk about this. I don't want to. It's not a big deal. It's just a conversation. Like, I want to have your opinion, and we want to come up with whatever we're gonna do, and I think knowing when is appropriate and when it's not. Obviously, if it's a big deal thing, you've got to bring it up when you got to bring it up. But all the little stuff, I think just knowing when is the appropriate time definitely saves a lot of blow-ups over things that are not. Are they important? Yes, but are they major? No.
Yeah. Awesome. And I think that. Sometimes you got to hash it out.
Yes.
Right? If you have, too much discretion, and you're never talking about it, then that's not good either. Excuse me. My throat. I think it's important that you talk about the things that you're struggling with, or that you have a quote-unquote problem with.
And I think if you have a solution or something in mind already, I think sometimes you can think about those things and be like, look, this would just fix the problem, or this would help with the issue, or give me better understanding. Because sometimes it's really just about understanding what the other, sometimes it's just perspective, right? I see it from this side, I'm not seeing it from that side. And so sometimes it really is just about hashing it out and saying, can you explain to me why you do this, so that I can understand? And because a lot of times it's okay, then it's a no-go. Then it's not an issue because now I got it and it's fine. Or it is, okay, I don't like that and you're doing it this way and I see why you're doing it this way. Could you do it X way, which would make me happy and still accomplish what you're trying to accomplish? And so sometimes just having these this thinking it through ahead of time for you, and then giving them a chance to say why.
So
helps.
taking their perspective, that way they don't feel attacked.
Yes, and you
asking,
don't feel like it's a win-lose situation. There's not a winner or a loser. It's just about how can we make it work together
for one common cause, unified goal.
Yeah, and I was trying not to give you like a marriage and family therapy answer, but I think we've touched on two very important things, and that's one, explain, don't complain.
Yeah.
Right. And two, that is allow yourself to be influenced by your partner.
Yeah.
Right. What you think matters.
Yeah.
The way you think about it is important, and it's okay for me to hear that and to don't hold me to this, but to change my mind too.
I will hold it to you.
Yeah. Because that's why I married you, because I think you have good ideas.
Yeah.
And I think you're a smart woman. And so sometimes when we're angry and we're frustrated,
That's not the time.
we might not allow that influence. But we do. We need to be influenced.
And sometimes you have that argument and you come back to it later. You say, we're going to table it for today and let's time out, and we will come back to it when we've had time to like cool down and think it through and have that conversation again at a later date. And sometimes that's enough, you know.
I like that. I believe in the timeout. Yes, indeed. Now let's talk about the old dreaded subject, money. Why do you think money is the number one cause of divorce in America?
Because it's stressful.
That's right.
I mean, money is stressful. It is your direct connection to the outside world. You know, it's like the sewage line that connects everything else to you, right? Because it connects to your car, your house, right? Your bills, your food, money. It's like,
it's easy for the world to tell you don't have enough of it,
yes,
or you got too much of it,
and
or you're spending it wrong,
right?
Or you're spending it right, but their spouse is spending it wrong. All the things.
And families use money in drastically different ways. And our family were, it was different, right? It was different. And
we just
came
from very different economic backgrounds.
Yeah.
And it made for a lot of not healthy conversations around money.
A lot of difficult conversations that, again, over time, you sand the edges off, but you have to have those conversations. And I think it goes back to a very similar principle with the children and raising them. It goes back to the principle, right, of having arguments and win and lose kind of thing. It's not about me, and it's not about you. It's about us, right? And having that shared meaning to, in this case, direct our finances, to use them to glorify God.
Yeah. Well, and our understanding of that has changed, because me and him did not stand on the same side of that for a long time, and because and honestly, I just was okay with that. Like, we weren't on the same page, but he was where he was and he believed it, and so I wasn't, who am I to be like, no, you're wrong, God did not say that. There's a time and a place, and if he feels like that's what God says, then I mean, it's okay, but I think it took a lot of time and study and us just talking about it together and coming to an agreement that works for us.
And I think that's actually the way you bring that up. I think that's a great example of how our upbringing can influence our theology, right, and how we think about God. I mean, naturally, that was before, right? I really started learning more about it, but I grew up with this perception of rich people, right? And it was a certain perception, and it wasn't a positive one. And in some ways, it kind of had this overarching view of what rich what it meant to be a rich person.
Very
right?
evil. And
yes,
dirty.
and that and that really soaked in because I was a poor person, right? And so it was hard then as we got older, as we started making more money, as we started doing things. It was just like, this is weird to put it this way, but you feel bad for having money, and then what do you do with that money when you have that much, right? How do you be a good steward of that? And so I originally kind of struggled with, how do you utilize that, right? And do you put away, the cultural phrase is put away for a rainy day, right?
Yeah.
And
I
I
had a hard time with
yes,
that.
I struggle with this idea of not quote unquote trusting God, right? For a long time in my youth, it kind of felt wrong because I never knew what it was like to have that so much money that you could put away, right? And so that was just a very big process for me that was attached to my youth and my experiences as a youth.
And so we're talking about marriage and divorce and money, because it affects poor people not having enough money to pay the bills. It also impacts rich people, wealthy people. I'm like, you guys have a maid, a chef, you guys have a groundskeeper, somebody wash your cars. Why are you guys angry enough to still marry and then fight it out in litigation and family court and splitting up the assets? And so I guess the perspective of money, how do you use it, how do you view it, not worshiping money per se. Okay.
Yeah, and I would add too just practical things to that. From the very get-go, I remember very vividly, before we were even married, sitting down and on a piece of lined paper budgeting. You can't ignore it.
Well,
you
and
just
when we did, it would be, because when we were not equal. So there were moments where we would budget, right? We'd have a budget, and then he would hand it to me, and I was the person who had to execute said budget. But he didn't ever look at it again. So he would say, we have whatever amount for eating out, but when we went over that, he never paid attention. He didn't know. He had no clue. And I would be left here trying to make the budget work, and I would just, you pay the bills you got to pay, and then that was that. And then he would say, well, why have, 3 months later, it's like, well, why hasn't the credit card been paid off? Well, because we went over this budget line 4 times, and you didn't know that. And I'm like, I'm just making it work. We paid all the bills, but we can't pay nothing off, not paying extra. But there was this I'll fix it. Come in and write off the budget, and then never look at it again. Well, it doesn't work like that. Money doesn't. You cannot one person delegate what should be spent and the other person do it, and this person never look at it again because it changes, right? As the month moves on, and I think that's what we over a lot of years realized. But you got to talk about it. You got to say, and whenever it's starting to feel unequal, you got to say, okay, look, I know you're busy and I know you're stressed and I know it's hard, but we have to sit down and have these hard conversations for a minute because it is stressful. Even today, it's like a thing. I told him the other day, I was like, I don't like talking about money, but we bought this house and we got plans. I said we need to sit down and figure out how we're going to make those plans happen because I don't want to be left trying to figure it out by myself, because I don't do well with it. And so I think there's that realizing. I mean, you might have one partner that loves doing money. Neither of us like doing money, and I think that's the reality of it. We don't like messing with it, so reality is neither of us wants to do it, and it's easy to ignore, and then problems happen. And so there's this part where it's yes, you have to deal with it, but you also have to figure out where everybody is and kind of play to your strengths, because I think that's just part of it. You can't ignore it, but you also can't put it all on one person or another. Right. There has to be it has to be talked about. It has to be dealt with, and regularly. You can't just put it on autopilot because money doesn't really work like that.
Right.
Yeah. So I'd say you have to talk about it, and the other thing is you can't chase it. I mean, if you chase it, I think it will. Consume you. I mean,
most definitely.
And you'll find yourself in places you don't want to be. And so I think that's important.
Yeah. You got to deal with what God's giving you, but you don't really have to. God will always give you enough, but chasing after it is just, that's the human mindset, right? Is I always need more.
Those who love money never have enough, Scripture says. All right. Okay. All right.
Yeah, we can do. Let's do about 10 more minutes. If that's okay.
Yeah. Two more questions then. Okay. Now, number 23, if you're tracking on your sheet, how important is physical intimacy in marriage?
It's very important. I mean, right? I mean, it's like
very important.
Oh, did you?
I did. Very important.
I mean, it's very important. There's two things that I deal with the most in marriage counseling: money and sex. Those are the two things that we deal with. And you can see why, right? You know why. Intimacy is important, but I think that's where you go wrong, is when you tunnel vision that to sex, right?
Yeah.
When you focus that on just one thing, when it's much broader than that, and that intimacy is a part of a whole.
Yeah.
Because there's some people who say, I wined and dined her, I cleaned up, I did everything on the honey-do list. And when it comes time for that, oh, she's tired. Oh, I've gotten a maid to clean all the house, to clean all the gutters, to do all the... When am I going to get any? It's been a month. It's been 6 months. Some studies even say it's once a year.
Yeah.
And so some people, and this applies to both genders, there are some men who deny their spouses. Like, I'm trying to be faithful. When is it going to happen? What am I doing wrong?
Yeah, and I think that's a big thing that we struggle with in the church. And jump in any point because, you know, this is actually what is one of my specialties in counseling, right? Is sexual addictions and things of that nature. But I can't make my sexual urges her responsibility. We have responsibility to each other, right? But I think sometimes, like you said, men or women, we can put the onus of our own challenges and preoccupation on the other person, right? And so I think I really, as a man, I felt like I really turned a corner whenever I started having that conversation with God. Whenever I started saying, at least for the bedroom, right? It's not about how many times, right? It's about the connection that we have.
The quality.
Yes. Yeah. Quality over quantity, right? But I really had to turn a corner because I think there was early on in my life, right, where I felt like I was owed something, right, or like I had a certain amount, right, and
average is 4 times a week, so it should be 4 times.
Right, and you read that even in books, you read that. And so you hear it in the church, right? And I think that's just maybe some misconceptions about Scripture. But nonetheless, it's more about the relationship and the intimacy as a whole, and showing that you care, right? Showing that you nor your partner are an object, right? You're not to be used; you're to be loved.
Yeah. Well, and I think that's different for everybody. I know you brought up, I mowed the lawn, I did the dishes, I did the things. It's like, for some women, yeah, that's all it takes. Like, I mean, you can get all you want as long as those things are done. But then there's this other part where it's like, men or women, that's not, there are other challenges to that rather than just attraction. It has nothing to do with that. Sex drive is a real deal. Sex drive is not equal. You do not marry somebody that necessarily has an equal sex drive to yours. So you might be great doing it 3 times a day, and they may not be. They may be like, dude, we did it once. You're good for a month, and that's fine. I think there's a lot of reasons for that. Physical things, there's mental things, there's a lot of challenges that go into that, and so it's hard to make it a thing. It is very important, but I also think that I think you have to try to meet somewhere in the middle. I think you have to try to find other ways of physical intimacy that lead to other things later, that give you those connections. I think those, because it is important. I think God gave it to us for a reason. But I think sometimes it is difficult too.
And I think you mentioned that in the question earlier as you were describing, and you just mentioned it there, right? That you both have to be mindful that this isn't a give and take, an exchange of things, right? If I do this many things, then I will get this in return, right? You have to do and appreciate those things that you're doing and connecting on for themselves, in and of themselves, and organically, that sex and many other things naturally begin to occur whenever you do that, right? Whenever you're appreciating and connecting in all the other ways.
Yeah, you just take some of the pressure off the table then.
Yeah, absolutely.
All right, awesome. Open discussion. Last question, and I'll be out of your hair. What wisdom, is there any other wisdom that you would like to share? Number 28. Is there any other wisdom that you would like to share?
Mr. Marriage and Family Therapist. You can
And
take
chaplain.
that one away.
Yeah.
Chaplain guy.
Pastor?
Relationship takes sacrifice. And according to God's word, sacrifice is for our own good.
Yeah.
And when we come to the altar, right, not because he has to, right, not because it's a one-for-one thing similar to the last conversation, but because that's the way he created us. When we come to God and we offer, we are blessed. And that's what relationship is like. When we come to God, or when we come to our partner and we offer, right? To use just the metaphor, if you will, of the Old Testament sacrifices, when you do those things, you are blessed, right? Yeah. We, of course, in doing so, can carry many of those other principles out. I don't want to give you my leftovers, right? If I'm being sacrificial and offering, right, to you in this relationship, then I want it to be my first fruits, right? I want to think about you, right? And that to be something for you. And I know that at least in our relationship, and I believe God's word teaches that when you do that, you're blessed. You're stretched, you're challenged, you grow. But bottom line, you're blessed.
Yeah. And I think you shouldn't be afraid of feeling stretched and challenged in your relationship, because I think as human beings, we should be striving to grow and change and improve. And you can't do that comfortably. You can't do that sitting on the couch. You have to be, physically, mentally, it has to be challenging. And I think your marriage is the place that's really more likely to happen. But you can't be angry about it all the time. There has to be this part where we talked about the arguments and stuff, and yes, those can be destructive, but I think that's also what gives you that push and pull, and that giving me time to work through all those concepts and those things that allow my perceptions to change and to adjust and to grow. And I think without that, you really don't become who God wants you to be ultimately. You can't become that without challenges. And so I think that, you know, marriage is one of those things. I thank God every day for giving it to us. I mean, as a people, but me specifically, I mean, I think every day, you know, I always tell Bella, like, please don't get married when you're 18. But, like, it was my biggest blessing. Please don't do it to me. But it was my biggest blessing. I mean, because I know today we wouldn't be who we are without that and what it brings to us.
Absolutely. I agree.
Awesome. Thank you for your time, and have a great day.
You too.